Red and blue emergency lights swirled through the falling snow, casting eerie shadows across the pristine white landscape. Inside the ambulance, a child's desperate cry pierced the night. In that moment, beneath the fluorescent glare, something impossible occurred. The blind boy's eyes opened wide, seeing for the first time, reflecting terror and wonder in equal measure. The world outside William Harrison's study window had disappeared. What was once a meticulously landscaped garden now lay beneath 4 feet of snow, with more falling every minute. Nature had erased the boundaries between his property and the surrounding New Hampshire wilderness. The 58-year-old CEO of Medinova Technologies sat alone in his leather chair, tumbler of whiskey untouched, staring at the photograph he held in trembling hands. 7 years had passed since Catherine's death, yet her smile still haunted him. The picture captured her exactly as he remembered. Auburn hair catching the sunlight, eyes crinkled with laughter, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. William ran his thumb over the glass, tracing the outline of her face. The pain hadn't diminished. It had merely transformed into something else, something colder and more permanent, like the mansion itself. "Mr. Harrison," a voice called from the doorway, "the meteorological report indicates the storm will intensify overnight. We should perform the system checks now." William didn't turn. Dr. Vanessa Sterling entered anyway, her heels clicking purposefully across the hardwood floor. At 45, she commanded attention. Tall, elegant, with the confidence of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. Her white lab coat seemed almost theatrical in this setting, a constant reminder of her role as both William's girlfriend and the director of his son's medical care. "Did you hear me, William?" Her voice softened as she approached, placing a manicured hand on his shoulder. "The storm could disrupt our power supply. Alexander's equipment needs to be secure." William finally looked up. "Run whatever checks you need." The mansion, once a showcase of wealth and architectural brilliance, had been transformed over the years. The ballroom where Catherine had hosted charity galas now housed medical equipment worth millions. The guest wing had been converted into research laboratories. The East Wing functioned as a private hospital room for Alexander, complete with monitoring systems that rivaled those at Johns Hopkins. It was no longer a home. It was a fortress against the inevitable, a monument to William's failure. "I've also prepared the proposal for the new treatment protocol." Vanessa placed a thick folder on his desk. "The team from Switzerland agrees with my assessment. This may be our last viable option." William opened the folder, scanning the first page. Medical terminology swam before his eyes. Neural pathway stimulation, experimental immunotherapy, surgical interventions. Between the lines lay a simple truth. After 8 years of specialists, treatments, and technological interventions, his son remained unreachable. Surgical insertion of neural transmitters. William looked up sharply. "This goes beyond what we discussed." Vanessa's expression remained professionally neutral. "Alexander's condition has plateaued. Conventional treatments have failed. This approach has shown promising results in similar cases." Similar cases. William closed the folder. "There are no similar cases. Alexander has been examined by 34 specialists across 3 continents. No consensus on diagnosis, no consistent treatment plan. Which is precisely why we need to consider more aggressive options." Vanessa moved to the window, watching the snow fall. "He's 8 years old, William. These are critical developmental years we're losing." Outside, the wind howled like a wounded animal. The blizzard was intensifying, nature's fury matching the storm brewing inside William's chest. The decision weighed on him. Trust the woman who had dedicated the past 5 years to Alexander's care, or trust his instinct that something about this new approach felt wrong. "I need time to consider this." William stood, placing the photo of Catherine face down on his desk. "You mentioned system checks?" "Yes." Vanessa's posture stiffened slightly. "And we'll need additional staff if we proceed with the new protocol. The current team is insufficient." William nodded absently, already moving toward the door. "Make whatever arrangements you think necessary." His footsteps echoed down the hallway as he made his way toward the East Wing. 2 security guards nodded respectfully as he approached his son's room. Inside, monitors hummed with artificial life, displaying heart rate, brain activity, oxygen levels, quantifying a child's existence in clinical data points. Alexander sat by the window, small hands pressed against the glass. Snow fell on the other side, each flake illuminated by the exterior lights. The boy didn't turn when William entered, gave no indication he had heard the door open. Dark curls fell across his forehead, framing a face that was Catherine's in miniature. "Hey, buddy." William's voice cracked as he crossed the room. "Quite a storm out there." No response. Alexander's eyes remained open, focused on something William couldn't see. The specialist called it cortical visual impairment. His eyes functioned, but his brain couldn't process the information. Combined with selective mutism, it created an impenetrable barrier between Alexander and the world. William sat beside his son, watching the snow fall together in silence. He'd built an empire from nothing, revolutionized medical technology, amassed a fortune that would last generations. Yet here, beside this small, silent child, he felt utterly powerless. Hours later, sleep eluding him, William wandered the silent corridors of his mansion. The night staff moved quietly, avoiding eye contact, trained to be invisible presences. The storm had intensified, wind battering the windows with increasing ferocity. His path took him past Vanessa's private office. The light beneath the door caught his attention, unusual for this hour. He hesitated, then tried the handle. Locked. Something about that simple act, Vanessa locking her door in his home, struck him as odd. In 5 years, she'd never demonstrated a need for such privacy. Returning to his bedroom, William lay awake, listening to the storm. Catherine would have known what to do about Alexander. She'd always possessed an intuition about people that he lacked, an ability to see beneath surfaces. The proposal Vanessa had presented nagged at him. Something wasn't right. Morning arrived without sun, the blizzard having transformed day into a grayscale approximation of night. William rose early, the house already humming with activity. Medical staff moved purposefully through the corridors, preparing for their daily routines with Alexander. Vanessa had left early for a conference call with colleagues in Zurich. Her absence provided an opportunity. William found himself outside her office door again, security key in hand. As CEO of a medical technology company, William understood the importance of privacy. Yet as a father, his instincts demanded action. The office appeared meticulously organized, everything in its place. William moved carefully, searching for the treatment proposal to review it again. The desk drawers contained only what he expected: files, supplies, professional correspondence. It was only by chance that he noticed the filing cabinet drawer didn't close completely. Pulling it open, he found standard patient files, including Alexander's comprehensive medical history. But behind these, hidden in the false back of the drawer, lay another set of documents. William's hands trembled as he examined them. Financial projections, legal documents, contingency plans. Together they painted a disturbing picture. If Alexander remained incapacitated until his 18th birthday, control of his inheritance, including 70% of Medinova's shares, would fall to his legal guardian. More disturbing were the medical notes. Alexander had shown responses to sensory stimulation during his first year, reactions that had mysteriously disappeared after Vanessa took over his care. The medication regimens documented in these private files differed from the official records. Sedatives, suppressants, not treatment, containment. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. William carefully photographed everything with his phone, then returned the documents exactly as he'd found them. His mind raced with implications, each more horrifying than the last. The confrontation erupted in his study that evening. William kept his voice measured, revealing nothing of what he'd discovered. Instead, he simply informed Vanessa he wouldn't approve the proposed treatment. "You're making a mistake." Her voice remained clinical, but her eyes flashed with something colder. "Alexander needs this intervention." "I disagree." William stood by the fireplace, watching flames consume logs. "The risks outweigh the potential benefits." "Based on what medical expertise?" Vanessa's composure cracked slightly. "You've trusted my judgment for 5 years, William. Why the sudden change?" "Call it paternal instinct." She laughed, a short, dismissive sound. "Paternal instinct? From the man who couldn't bear to look at his son for the first year after Catherine died? The man who built a medical fortress so he wouldn't have to actually parent a disabled child?" The accusation struck like a physical blow. William turned, facing her fully. "That's unfair." "Is it?" Vanessa stepped closer. You've been an absentee father hiding behind technology and specialists. Alexander needs treatment, not sentimentality. He needs something else entirely. William kept his voice level with effort. And I intend to find out what that is. Her posture changed subtly, the shift barely perceptible but unmistakable to someone who'd spent years reading business rivals across negotiation tables. Vanessa was recalculating. I could report you, you know. Her voice softened dangerously. Child Services takes a dim view of parents who refuse medical treatment for their children, especially parents with your history of emotional detachment. William felt ice forming around his heart. Are you threatening me? I'm stating facts. She gathered her files calmly. Without proper guardianship, Alexander could be placed in state care. Is that what you want? Get out. Excuse me? Get out of my study. William's voice remained quiet, but something in his tone made Vanessa take a step back. We'll continue this discussion tomorrow. After she left, William poured himself a drink with unsteady hands. The woman he trusted with his son's care, with his heart, had just revealed herself as something entirely different. The question was why? What was her endgame? Medinova's shares, Alexander's inheritance, control of a multi-billion-dollar medical technology company. The pieces assembled themselves in his mind, forming a picture too monstrous to contemplate. Yet it made terrible sense. Vanessa had ensured Alexander remained incapacitated while positioning herself as the only person capable of caring for him. William needed evidence. He needed allies. Most importantly, he needed to protect Alexander until he could untangle this nightmare. The storm outside had rendered the estate isolated. No one could get in or out until the roads cleared. William had to move carefully. The next morning, William made a call from his secure line, reaching his most trusted assistant at the corporate office. The request was simple. Find a new household staff member immediately, someone with childcare experience, someone with no connection to Vanessa's medical network. The urgency in his voice must have communicated the importance, because by afternoon, his assistant had arranged for a candidate to visit despite the treacherous weather conditions. A Ms. Rebecca Moore will arrive tomorrow for an interview, his assistant informed him. Single mother, excellent references, desperately needs work. She's willing to brave the storm for the opportunity. Make sure Vanessa doesn't know about this. William ended the call, already formulating his next moves. The following day, the storm intensified beyond the meteorologist's predictions. Wind howled around the mansion's corners, snow accumulating faster than the grounds crew could clear it. William stood at his office window, watching the road anxiously. The interview candidate was already an hour late. Just as he was about to call off the watch, headlights appeared through the curtain of white, moving slowly along the private drive. The vehicle, an older model sedan, far more modest than anything usually seen at the Harrison estate, struggled through the deepening snow, finally coming to a stop halfway up the drive, unable to proceed further. William grabbed his coat and headed for the entrance. The security team looked surprised as he pushed past them into the storm. The wind hit him like a physical force, stealing his breath. Snow immediately coated his expensive wool coat as he trudged toward the stranded vehicle. Through the whiteout conditions, he made out two figures emerging, one tall, one small, a woman and a child. Ms. Moore? William called against the wind. The woman turned, surprise evident on her face. She hadn't expected the billionaire himself to come to her rescue. She was younger than he'd anticipated, perhaps mid-30s, her brown hair whipping around her face in the wind. Beside her stood a little girl, no more than 7, clutching a worn backpack to her chest. Mr. Harrison? The woman shouted over the storm. I'm so sorry. The car couldn't make it up the hill. Come with me, William gestured toward the mansion. Bring what you need for tonight. No one's going anywhere in this weather. The trio struggled through deepening snow, the little girl stumbling until William lifted her into his arms without thinking. Her eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't protest, clutching her backpack tighter. Inside, they stood dripping in the grand foyer. The contrast between the howling storm outside and the clinical stillness within stark and immediate. Rebecca Moore looked around, taking in the transformed mansion with wide eyes. The little girl pressed against her mother's side, curious but hesitant. I didn't realize you'd be bringing your daughter. William's tone wasn't accusatory, merely surprised. I'm so sorry, Mr. Harrison. Genuine concern crossed Rebecca's face. My babysitter canceled at the last minute. With the storm coming, I couldn't find anyone else. I can reschedule if this is inappropriate. Before William could respond, Vanessa appeared at the top of the grand staircase. Her expression shifted from surprise to cold assessment as she descended. William, what's this? Her voice carried the artificial warmth she used with board members she intended to remove. Ms. Rebecca Moore, our potential new household manager. William made the introduction calmly. And her daughter? Lily, the little girl supplied, her voice small but clear. They were caught in the storm. William continued. Their car couldn't make it up the drive. They'll be staying until the road's clear. Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. How unfortunate. Though I don't recall discussing additional household staff, particularly not. Her gaze swept over Rebecca's modest appearance. General management. With your new treatment protocol, you mentioned needing additional support. William's tone was final. Ms. Moore comes highly recommended. Something dangerous flashed across Vanessa's features before her professional mask slipped back into place. Of course, though the guest rooms in the West Wing are being renovated, where exactly will they stay? William recognized the power play. The caretaker's cottage should be comfortable enough. It's fully furnished and has its own generator. Rebecca shifted uncomfortably. We don't want to impose. If there's a problem, there's no problem. William cut her off gently. Thomas will show you to the cottage and help bring in your luggage. We can discuss the position tomorrow when the storm has passed. After they left, Vanessa's pretense of politeness evaporated. What are you doing, William? Bringing strangers into the house without proper background checks? With Alexander in such a delicate state? The cottage is separate from the main house. William headed toward his study. And I don't answer to you, Vanessa. Remember that. Their eyes locked in silent combat, the balance of power in their relationship shifting irrevocably. Without another word, Vanessa turned and walked away, her posture rigid with barely controlled fury. That evening, William sent one of the security staff to escort Rebecca and Lily to dinner in the smaller family dining room. Vanessa had begged off, citing work, which suited William perfectly. He needed to assess these potential allies without her interfering. Rebecca Moore proved to be intelligent and observant. She asked thoughtful questions about the position, demonstrating experience beyond what her resume suggested. There was a quiet dignity in her manner that reminded William of Catherine, someone comfortable in their own skin, regardless of surroundings. Lily, meanwhile, ate spaghetti with the solemn concentration only children can bring to pasta. Occasionally, she glanced around the ornate dining room, eyes wide with wonder, but she maintained impeccable manners for a child her age. Lily is quite well behaved, William observed, breaking a lengthy silence. Rebecca smiled, the expression warming her entire face. She's my little old soul, always has been. Do you like stories, Lily? William surprised himself with the question. The little girl looked up, twirling spaghetti around her fork with careful precision. Yes, sir, I like the ones with magic best. Magic? William found himself smiling for what felt like the first time in years. Lily nodded seriously. Not fairy godmother magic. Real magic. The kind that's hidden in ordinary things. Rebecca brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Lily makes little clay sculptures. She believes they hold special powers. They do. Lily's certainty was absolute. They help people remember who they really are. Something about the child's conviction touched William. He was about to respond when a commotion erupted in the hallway. One of the medical staff appeared at the doorway, face flushed with panic. Mr. Harrison, Alexander is missing from his room. The words struck like a physical blow. In 8 years, Alexander had never wandered from his supervised areas. He'd never shown any desire or ability to navigate the mansion independently. When was he last seen? William was already on his feet. During evening vitals, 30 minutes ago, Dr. Sterling is checking the security feeds now. The dinner forgotten, William moved with controlled urgency. Ms. Moore, please stay here with Lily. I'll handle this. But as he turned toward the door, he realized Lily was no longer at the table. Somehow, in the brief moment of distraction, the little girl had slipped away unnoticed. Lily? Rebecca called, panic edging into her voice. The security system would have prevented Lily from accessing most areas of the mansion, But if Alexander had somehow managed to circumvent those same systems, William felt cold dread settling in his stomach. The search party, organized with military precision, security staff and medical personnel methodically checking each room. Vanessa coordinated from the security office, her voice cold and professional over the radio system. William found himself drawn toward the east wing, some instinct pulling him in that direction. As he approached the solarium, a glass-enclosed garden that had been Catherine's favorite place, William heard it. Soft laughter, child's laughter. He froze, uncertain if his mind was playing tricks. Then it came again, unmistakable in the silence. William approached the solarium doors slowly. The room was illuminated only by landscape lighting, reflecting off the snow outside, creating an ethereal blue glow. Among the potted plants and abandoned gardening equipment, two small figures sat on the floor. Lily knelt in a patch of moonlight, her small hands working with what appeared to be modeling clay. Beside her, cross-legged on the tile floor, sat Alexander. His posture was different, relaxed, attentive. As William watched, frozen in the doorway, Lily placed a small clay figure in Alexander's hands. Alexander's fingers moved over the sculpture with delicate precision. His eyes remained unfocused, but his face held an expression William hadn't seen in years: concentration, interest, presence. "See?" Lily's voice was soft. "This one's a bird. Feel the wings." Alexander's fingers traced the crude wings of the clay figure. His lips parted slightly, but no sound emerged. Yet something had changed. The perpetual tension in his small body had eased. He looked for the first time in William's memory like a child rather than a patient. William must have made some sound because Lily looked up suddenly. "Hello, Mr. Harrison, I've found your boy. He was looking for the rain." "The rain?" William entered slowly, afraid to disrupt whatever miracle was unfolding. Lily nodded seriously. "He can't see the snow, but he can hear the rain on the glass. I think he was following the sound." William knelt beside them, his heart pounding. "Alexander? Buddy?" Alexander showed no reaction to his father's voice, not unusual, but continued exploring the clay figure with remarkable focus. This itself was extraordinary. He typically showed no interest in objects presented to him. "He likes the way clay feels," Lily explained, as if this were obvious. "It's warm from your hands, and it remembers the shape you give it." Footsteps approached rapidly behind them. Rebecca appeared first, relief washing over her features when she spotted Lily. Vanessa arrived seconds later, flanked by security personnel. "What's going on here?" Vanessa's clinical gaze assessed the scene, lingering on Alexander's unusual posture and the clay in his hands. "The children were just getting acquainted," William said, his voice deceptively calm despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Vanessa moved forward briskly. "Alexander needs to return to his room immediately. This disruption to his routine is unacceptable." "He's fine, Vanessa." William didn't look away from his son. "Better than fine." "This is inappropriate." Vanessa's professional veneer cracked slightly. "That child shouldn't be touching Alexander's things. The clay could contain allergens." "There are protocols." "I brought my own clay." Lily held up a small plastic container. "It's just earth and water. It can't hurt anybody." Vanessa's expression hardened. "Young lady, Alexander has very special needs. He isn't like other children. He can't play like you do." "He's playing now," Lily observed quietly. Indeed, Alexander continued manipulating the clay bird, seemingly oblivious to the tension surrounding him. His fingers worked the material with surprising dexterity, reshaping it subtly. The moment stretched, fraught with unspoken conflict. Finally, Rebecca stepped forward. "Lily, honey, it's time for us to go back to the cottage. Mr. Harrison and Dr. Sterling need to take care of Alexander now." Lily looked reluctant, but stood obediently. "Can I leave the clay with him? He's not finished talking to it yet." "Talking to it?" Vanessa's tone held thinly veiled derision. "With his hands," Lily explained patiently, as though to someone very slow. "That's how he talks." William made a decision in that moment, one based not on medical expertise or corporate strategy, but on the simplest of observations. His son, who had spent years isolated in his own world, had connected with something. Someone. "Alexander can keep the clay," he said firmly, "and if Lily would like to visit him again tomorrow, she's welcome to." Vanessa's objection was immediate. William, that's completely contrary to our established protocols. The potential for negative outcomes is a risk I'm willing to take, William finished for her. His tone left no room for debate. Sometimes, Vanessa, progress requires us to venture beyond established protocols. As Rebecca led Lily away, the little girl turned back once. He's not broken, you know. He just sees with different parts than we do. The words hung in the air long after they'd gone, echoing in the silent solarium. William remained kneeling beside Alexander, watching as his son's fingers continued their delicate exploration of the clay bird, reshaping it into something new, something his own. Outside, the blizzard raged with renewed fury, snow piling against the glass walls of the solarium. Yet inside, in the quiet space between father and son, something warm and fragile had begun to take root. Whether it was hope, understanding, or something without a name, William couldn't say. But for the first time in years, the cold emptiness inside him had begun to thaw. Dawn arrived without ceremony, a grim transition from black to gray as the blizzard continued its assault. William stood at the kitchen window, coffee cooling in his hand, watching the cottage where Rebecca and Lily had spent the night. A thin wisp of smoke rose from the chimney, dancing and disappearing into the whiteout conditions. Sleep had eluded him. The image of Alexander with the clay bird kept replaying in his mind, those nimble fingers working the material with purpose, the subtle relaxation in his posture. Signs of engagement William hadn't witnessed in years. One evening with a strange little girl had accomplished what millions of dollars in specialized care could not. The satellite link is down. William turned to find Thomas, his head of security, standing in the doorway. The man's expression remained professionally neutral, but the tension in his shoulders told a different story. Internet? William asked. Thomas shook his head. Cellular networks too. The storm took out the main tower on Route 16. Backup systems are functioning for internal communications only. Complete isolation. The realization settled like ice in William's stomach. With the roads impassable and communications severed, they were entirely cut off from the outside world. Under normal circumstances, this would merely be an inconvenience. But now, with his suspicions about Vanessa, it felt dangerously like a trap. Where is Dr. Sterling this morning? In the East Wing lab. She's been there since 5. William nodded, dismissing the security chief with a gesture. Complete isolation could work both ways. Vanessa couldn't bring in outside help any more than he could. The storm had created a stalemate. The mansion's East Wing housed state-of-the-art medical facilities, equipment not yet available to most research hospitals. William's path there took him past Alexander's room. He paused, watching through the observation window as the morning nurse conducted routine assessments. His son sat by the window as always, seemingly transfixed by the falling snow. But something had changed. In Alexander's hands rested the small clay figure from the previous night, his fingers continuously, gently reshaping it. William was about to enter when a sound caught his attention. Vanessa's voice, uncharacteristically sharp, coming from her office further down the corridor. The door was slightly ajar. William moved closer, instinct telling him to remain out of sight. I don't care about the storm, Vanessa hissed into the phone. The situation has changed. We need to accelerate the timeline. A pause as she listened to the response. No, you don't understand. There's a complication. A woman and her daughter. They've somehow connected with the boy. Another pause, longer this time. Of course I've maintained the protocol, but this child, she's done something, using clay of all things. Primitive sensory therapy. Her tone dripped with contempt. The important thing is that Harrison noticed. He's beginning to question everything. William's hand tightened on the doorframe. Listen to me, Mason. Everything we've worked for is at risk. The board meeting is in 2 weeks. If Harrison discovers the full extent of our arrangement before then, her voice dropped to a whisper. The contingency plan. Yes, we may have no choice. William withdrew silently, his suspicions crystallizing into certainty. Not only was Vanessa deliberately keeping Alexander in his condition, but she was working with someone else, this Mason, towards some larger goal involving Medinova's board. The contingency plan she mentioned sent a chill through him. What exactly was she prepared to do if her primary plan failed? Back in his study, William accessed the company database through his secure terminal. Masonia, the name triggered a distant memory. He searched through board member profiles, venture partners, research affiliates. Nothing. Then, on impulse, he checked competitor profiles. Mason Blackwell, chief strategic officer at Helix Pharmaceuticals, Medinova's largest competitor. A company that had been trying to acquire controlling interest in Medinova for the past 3 years. The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Vanessa wasn't just manipulating Alexander's condition for potential guardianship. She was orchestrating a corporate takeover from within. If she gained control of Alexander's inheritance, she could deliver Medinova to Helix on a silver platter. William's mind raced through options. With communications down, he couldn't contact his legal team or the board. He couldn't remove Vanessa without risking Alexander's care. He needed evidence, time, and allies. His gaze drifted to the window toward the cottage barely visible through the swirling snow. An hour later, William stood in the mansion's conservatory, watching as Lily carefully arranged clay tools on a low table. Rebecca had been hesitant when he'd explained his request, that Lily continue whatever connection she'd established with Alexander, but the genuine desperation in his voice had convinced her. Lily has a gift with people, Rebecca had explained quietly. She always sees something in them that others miss. But I need to be clear, Mr. Harrison. I won't let her be used as an experiment. That's not my intention, William had assured her. I just want to understand what happened last night. Why Alexander responded to her when he's never responded to anyone else. Now, watching the little girl prepare with such serious concentration, William felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The conservatory had been Catherine's sanctuary, a glass-enclosed garden where temperature and humidity were precisely controlled to maintain exotic plants year-round. Unlike the clinical sterility of Alexander's usual environments, this space brimmed with life. Vibrant colors, earthy scents, the gentle sound of water from the small stone fountain. It was the furthest thing from a medical setting imaginable. When Alexander was wheeled in by his attendant, his posture remained rigid, eyes unfocused as always. But as soon as Lily approached, something subtle changed in his demeanor. His head tilted slightly, as if listening more intently. "Hello again," Lily said, her voice gentle but not condescending. "I brought more clay today, different kinds with different feelings." William and Rebecca watched from a discreet distance as Lily carefully took Alexander's hands and placed them into a bowl of reddish clay. "This one is warmer because it has more iron in it," she explained seriously. "It remembers the earth it came from." To William's astonishment, Alexander's fingers began to move through the clay immediately, exploring its texture. There was no hesitation, no withdrawal, behaviors typically associated with his sensory defensiveness. "He likes it," Lily announced, looking up at William with a smile that transformed her entire face. "See how his breathing changed?" William hadn't noticed, but now that she mentioned it, he could see that Alexander's typically shallow breathing had deepened and slowed. A subtle sign, but significant. Over the next hour, Lily introduced Alexander to 4 different types of clay, each with different temperatures, textures, and properties. She spoke continuously in a soft, matter-of-fact voice, explaining each material as if Alexander could perfectly understand her. Most remarkably, she waited after each explanation, as if listening to a response only she could hear. "He's talking with his hands," Lily told Rebecca when she asked about this. "You just have to know how to listen." By the session's end, Alexander had created several crude shapes, or rather his hands had formed the clay in ways that seemed deliberate rather than random. One resembled a bird, another perhaps a simple house. William found himself transfixed by his son's fingers, which moved with a dexterity he'd never displayed during years of occupational therapy. As the attendant prepared to take Alexander back to his room, Vanessa appeared in the conservatory doorway. Her expression remained professionally neutral, but William recognized the cold calculation behind her eyes. "I see we're conducting art therapy now," she observed, her tone making the words an accusation. "Without medical supervision." "Dr. Sterling," William acknowledged her formally. "This is Mrs. Moore and her daughter Lily, whom you met last night." Rebecca extended her hand, which Vanessa briefly took. "Lily seems to have established a connection with Alexander through sensory play. It's quite remarkable." Vanessa's smile never reached her eyes. Many children with Alexander's condition display temporary interest in novel stimuli. It's a known phenomenon, not an actual therapeutic breakthrough. The dismissal was deliberate, designed to crush the fragile hope building in William's chest. But he had seen something genuine in Alexander's engagement, something that contradicted years of Vanessa's assessments. Nevertheless, William replied evenly, I've asked Ms. Moore and Lily to continue these sessions while they're with us. Something dangerous flashed across Vanessa's features before her professional mask slipped back into place. Of course, though I must insist on proper documentation and monitoring for Alexander's safety. After Vanessa and Alexander departed, Rebecca turned to William, her expression troubled. She doesn't like us being here. No, William agreed, watching Lily carefully pack away her clay tools. She doesn't. May I ask you something directly, Mr. Harrison? Rebecca lowered her voice. Is there something I should know about this situation? About Dr. Sterling? William hesitated, weighing his instinct to trust this woman against years of corporate caution. Let's just say I have concerns about my son's care. Concerns I can't discuss with Dr. Sterling. Rebecca's gaze was steady, assessing. My daughter believes Alexander can see and hear more than people think. She believes he's trapped, not absent. The word struck William like a physical blow. Trapped, not absent. It articulated perfectly the doubt that had been growing in his mind. Would you be willing to help me find out if she's right? He asked quietly. Rebecca glanced at Lily, who was now examining one of the exotic plants with fascination. What exactly are you asking? Just observation for now, eyes and ears in places where mine can't be. William met her gaze directly. I believe someone may be working against Alexander's best interests. I need to confirm that before I can act. Rebecca didn't answer immediately, her expression suggesting internal conflict. Finally, she nodded once. For Alexander. The storm intensified throughout the day, wind howling around the mansion's corners like a living thing. Power fluctuations became more frequent, forcing the backup generators to engage repeatedly. The isolation of the estate deepened as snow accumulated faster than the grounds crew could clear it. William used the deteriorating conditions as an excuse to move Rebecca and Lily from the cottage into the mansion's guest wing, ostensibly for safety, but strategically to give them greater access. Vanessa opposed the move but couldn't articulate a reasonable objection without revealing her true concerns. That evening, while Vanessa was occupied with her regular conference call to the medical team in Zurich, Rebecca undertook her first mission of observation. William had casually mentioned that the mansion's extensive archives might contain children's books for Lily, archives located conveniently near the medical record storage. The mansion's lower level housed a labyrinth of climate-controlled rooms dedicated to preserving the Harrison family's history, corporate records, and medical documentation. Rebecca moved through the dimly lit corridors with quiet purpose, her background as a hospital administrator making her comfortable with the filing systems she encountered. The medical records room required William's keycard for access, which he had accidentally left on the kitchen counter during dinner. Inside, Rebecca found exactly what William had described. Years of Alexander's medical history, meticulously documented and filed chronologically. Working quickly, she photographed key pages from Alexander's earliest assessments. The clinical language was dense, but certain phrases stood out with alarming clarity. Patient demonstrates appropriate visual tracking responses. Vocalization attempts consistent with developmental milestones. Sensory integration shows promising improvements. These assessments, dated from Alexander's first year of life, directly contradicted the narrative Rebecca had been given, that Alexander had been born with permanent, untreatable conditions. More disturbing were the medication records. Beginning precisely when Dr. Sterling took over Alexander's care, powerful sedatives and neural inhibitors appeared in his treatment protocol. Medications typically used to manage aggressive patients, not facilitate development. As Rebecca carefully returned the files to their original positions, she noticed a section of the shelving that seemed oddly configured. Pushing slightly revealed a hidden compartment containing a single file labeled simply CH. Inside were autopsy reports for Catherine Harrison. Rebecca hesitated, knowing she was crossing into deeply personal territory, but something compelled her to continue. The cause of death was listed as complications from childbirth, specifically an adverse reaction to medication. The attending physician's name had been redacted, but a handwritten note in the margin caught her attention. Vanessa administered the experimental compound without authorization. Rebecca's hand trembled as she photographed these final pages before returning everything exactly as she'd found it. The implications were too terrible to contemplate. She needed to get this information to William immediately. Upstairs, William sat in the conservatory with Lily, listening as the child explained her theories about Clay with the serious intensity only 7-year-olds can muster. Regular Clay remembers what it was before, she was saying, but not everyone can hear its memories. Alexander can, though. How do you know that? William asked, genuinely curious. Lily considered the question thoughtfully. His fingers listened differently than other people's. When most people touch things, they're just feeling what's on the outside. Alexander feels what's inside, too. The observation was startlingly perceptive. William was about to respond when Rebecca appeared in the doorway, her face pale despite the careful composure she maintained for Lily's benefit. "Mr. Harrison, could I speak with you about those books we discussed?" Understanding the code immediately, William excused himself. In the privacy of his study, Rebecca transferred the photographed documents to his computer, watching as his expression transformed from concern to horror to rage. "She was there," William whispered, staring at the autopsy notes. "When Catherine died." The experimental compound. It was a Medinova drug trial that had been suspended due to safety concerns. "There's more," Rebecca said quietly. The early assessments of Alexander, they show normal development for his first year. The regression began only after Dr. Sterling took over his care. William's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles white. She's been keeping him sedated. All these years, preventing progress rather than encouraging it. But why? What could possibly justify control, Sam? William's voice was ice. With Catherine gone and Alexander permanently incapacitated, Vanessa positions herself as his guardian. Upon my death or Alexander's 18th birthday, she gains control of his inheritance, including his shares in Medinova. You believe she's working toward this deliberately? That she would harm a child for corporate control? William opened another file on his computer, financial records he'd been analyzing. Vanessa has been systematically acquiring stock options in Helix Pharmaceuticals, Medinova's primary competitor, through offshore accounts. If she gained control of Alexander's shares, she could force a merger that would make her one of the wealthiest women in the pharmaceutical industry. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of realization. This wasn't just medical malpractice. It was a methodical, years-long conspiracy that had already claimed one life and imprisoned another in his own body. "What will you do?" Rebecca finally asked. William closed the laptop. "First, protect Alexander. The storm works in our favor for now. Vanessa can't bring in outside help any more than I can contact authorities." He paused, strategy forming. "I need evidence of her current interference with Alexander's care, not just historical records." That night, after the household settled into uneasy silence, William installed hidden cameras in the conservatory, now unofficially established as Alexander and Lily's Clay studio. Small, sophisticated devices that would record from multiple angles, capturing every interaction. Morning brought no relief from the storm. If anything, conditions had worsened, with local weather services reporting that this blizzard might break historical records for both snowfall and duration. The mansion's systems strained under the continuing assault, power fluctuating despite the generators. Vanessa appeared increasingly agitated by the communication blackout, checking the satellite phone repeatedly throughout the morning. Without her daily consultations with colleagues in Zurich, whom William now suspected were actually contacts at Helix, she seemed off balance, her carefully maintained control slipping. The third Clay session began after lunch. Lily had prepared something special, a mix of materials including warm clay, cool water, and what she called snow clay, actually porcelain slip chilled in the refrigerator. The combination of temperatures and textures was designed to create distinct sensory experiences. "Today we're going to make a story your hands can see," Lily explained to Alexander as she guided his fingers to each material. William watched from the observation area, Rebecca beside him, both intent on every subtle reaction from Alexander. Vanessa had initially insisted on attending, but was called away by an equipment malfunction in the East Wing, a distraction Thomas had orchestrated at William's request. What happened next would forever be etched in William's memory. Lily guided Alexander's hands to create a small landscape, mountains from the warm clay, a lake from the cool water, snow from the white porcelain. As she worked, she told a simple story about a bird that lived in the mountains and flew over the lake to find snow. The snow was very cold, she narrated, placing Alexander's hands into the chilled porcelain. But underneath there was something warm waiting. She helped him dig through the porcelain to find a small ball of the warmest clay, which she'd hidden earlier. The bird found the warm thing inside the cold snow, Lily continued, and when he touched it, he could suddenly see. As she spoke these words, she took a small amount of the warm clay and gently, carefully pressed it over Alexander's closed eyelids. William tensed, about to intervene, but Rebecca placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Wait," she whispered. Alexander's body grew completely still. For a moment it seemed he had withdrawn entirely, retreating into the catatonic state that sometimes occurred when he was overstimulated. But then, slowly, deliberately, his eyelids began to flutter beneath the thin layer of clay. Lily waited, perfectly calm, as if this reaction were exactly what she'd expected. "The warm thing helps your eyes remember how to work," she said simply. Alexander's hands moved to his face, touching the clay on his eyelids, with cautious exploration. Then, with a deliberation that took William's breath away, he opened his eyes fully. For the first time in years, Alexander's gaze wasn't vacant. His eyes moved, focusing first on his clay-covered hands, then on the table before him, then, miraculously, lifting to find Lily's face. "Hello," Lily said softly, without surprise or fanfare. "I'm Lily." Alexander's lips parted. No sound emerged, but the attempt itself was unprecedented. His eyes remained fixed on Lily's face, blinking rapidly as if adjusting to new information. William moved forward slowly, hardly daring to breathe. "Alexander?" The boy's head turned at the sound of his father's voice. Their eyes met, truly met, for the first time since Alexander was an infant. Recognition flickered across the child's face. His hand reached out, trembling with effort. William took that small hand in his own, feeling the clay still warm between their palms. "I'm here, buddy. I'm right here." The moment stretched, suspended in time, father and son truly seeing each other after years of separation imposed by more than just a medical condition. Something fundamental had shifted, a barrier breached that all the expensive technology and specialists had never touched. Alexander's mouth opened again. The sound that emerged was barely audible. Not quite a word, but unmistakably an attempt. A single syllable that might have been "day." The spell broke at the sound of shattering glass. Vanessa stood in the doorway, a fallen water glass in fragments at her feet, her face drained of color. For a brief moment, raw fury overtook her carefully composed features before she mastered herself. "What is going on here?" Her voice was deadly quiet. Before anyone could respond, Alexander's body suddenly went rigid. His eyes rolled back, and he began to convulse violently. The seizure took hold with frightening speed, his small frame jerking uncontrollably. "Alexander!" William grabbed his son, turning him onto his side as he'd been trained to do years ago. "Call the medical team!" Rebecca shouted at Vanessa, who remained frozen in the doorway. What happened next occurred in disjointed fragments, time simultaneously stretching and compressing. Medical staff swarmed the conservatory. Alexander was strapped to a gurney, oxygen mask secured over his face. Vanessa took control with clinical efficiency, barking orders as they rushed toward the medical wing. William followed, heart hammering against his ribs, the brief connection with his son now replaced by primal terror. Behind him, Lily stood motionless beside the clay table, her small face solemn as she watched Alexander being wheeled away. "It wasn't supposed to happen yet," she whispered, though no one remained to hear her. Hours passed in agonizing slowness. Alexander was stabilized, heavily sedated, and connected to monitoring equipment that tracked every bodily function with mechanical precision. Vanessa emerged from the treatment room, her professional demeanor firmly back in place. "The seizure appears to have been triggered by extreme sensory overload," she explained to William, her voice neutral. "I've administered anticonvulsants and sedatives. He's stable now, but I'm implementing a full restriction protocol. No visitors except essential medical personnel. I want to see him, William demanded. Unadvisable at this time. Vanessa's tone allowed no argument. The priority is preventing another seizure. Complete sensory reduction is necessary. Was it the clay? William asked, guilt crushing his chest. Did we cause this? Something like satisfaction flickered behind Vanessa's eyes. Unorthodox therapies often have unintended consequences. This is precisely why established medical protocols exist. She consulted her tablet. I've scheduled a video consultation with the neurology team as soon as communications are restored. In the meantime, I've filed an emergency treatment authorization. She handed William a tablet displaying a legal document. This grants me temporary medical guardianship to make emergency treatment decisions without delay. Standard procedure in these circumstances. William scanned the document, legal training instantly recognizing the overreach hidden in the clinical language. This wasn't just emergency medical authorization. It was a preliminary application for permanent guardianship, citing William's demonstrated willingness to subject the patient to unproven and harmful interventions. I'm not signing this. William returned the tablet. Vanessa's expression hardened. Then I'll be forced to document your refusal to authorize necessary emergency care. When communications are restored, Child Protective Services will be very interested in that decision. The threat hung between them. If William refused to sign, Vanessa would build a case against him as an unfit parent. If he signed, he potentially surrendered his right to make decisions about Alexander's care. I need time to review this, he said finally. You have 48 hours. Vanessa's voice was cold. After that, Alexander's condition will require interventions that cannot legally proceed without either your authorization or emergency guardianship. As she walked away, William felt the walls closing in. 48 hours, a deadline engineered to force his compliance while communications remained severed by the storm. Vanessa was accelerating her timeline, using Alexander's seizure, a seizure William now suspected she might have somehow triggered, to gain legal control. He found Rebecca and Lily in the kitchen. The little girl sat at the counter, unusually subdued, pushing a spoon through a bowl of untouched soup. How is he? Rebecca asked immediately. Stable? Sedated? William sank into a chair, exhaustion overwhelming him. Vanessa has restricted all access and is pushing for emergency guardianship. Rebecca's expression grew troubled. William, there's something you should know. When I was returning the books to the library earlier, I took a wrong turn. I found myself near Dr. Sterling's private rooms. William looked up sharply. Her door was ajar. Inside, on her desk, was a vial of medication. The label caught my attention because I recognized it from my hospital administration days. Rebecca hesitated. It was pentylenitetrazole, a drug sometimes used in research to deliberately induce seizures in test subjects. The implication struck William like a physical blow. You think she caused Alexander's seizure? Deliberately? I can't be certain, but the timing is suspicious. Alexander has his first breakthrough, makes eye contact, attempts to speak, and minutes later suffers a major seizure after years of stable condition? William's mind raced through the implications. If Vanessa had indeed triggered the seizure, it served multiple purposes: discrediting Lily's approach, justifying increased medical intervention, and creating the emergency she needed to push for guardianship. There's more, Rebecca continued, her voice dropping. While in her rooms, I noticed her medical credentials framed on the wall, but something seemed off about the dates. When I returned to the guest room, I searched her name in the medical licensing database I still have access to through my old hospital login. She slid her phone across the table, displaying a search result. The real Vanessa Sterling completed her residency at Johns Hopkins, as your Vanessa claims. But the real Dr. Sterling died in a car accident 6 years ago. Whoever this woman is, she's using a dead doctor's identity. The floor seemed to drop from beneath William's feet. He'd invited an imposter into his home, entrusted his son's care to a woman who wasn't just unethical, but potentially not even a qualified physician. The horror of this realization collided with another, even more terrible thought. If Vanessa wasn't who she claimed to be, what had she really been doing to Alexander all these years? We need to get into her office, William said, rising from his chair. Find concrete evidence of what she's been doing to Alexander. Rebecca glanced at Lily, concern evident. William, if she's willing to induce seizures in a child, what else might she do if she feels cornered? The question hung in the air between them, giving voice to the escalating danger. Outside, the blizzard howled with renewed fury, trapping them all together in this mansion-turned battlefield. Somewhere within these walls, a woman with stolen identity and deadly intent was preparing her next move. They had 48 hours to stop her. 48 hours to save Alexander before William would be forced to either surrender his son to Vanessa's care or be branded an unfit father by the authorities. The storm that had initially seemed an obstacle now represented their only advantage. Vanessa couldn't bring in outside help any more than they could reach authorities. For now, they were on their own. The true battle for Alexander's future had only just begun. Night had fallen, though darkness and day had become nearly indistinguishable as the blizzard entered its third relentless day. The mansion groaned against the onslaught, its ancient bones protesting the Arctic assault. In the East Wing medical suite, Alexander lay motionless beneath a web of monitoring equipment, his small chest rising and falling in the artificial rhythm imposed by sedatives. William stood in the observation room, separated from his son by a wall of glass. The barrier felt symbolic of the 8 years he'd spent watching Alexander from a distance, relying on experts and technology rather than his own instincts as a father. For the first time, he allowed himself to face the brutal truth. He had outsourced his most sacred responsibility out of fear and grief, and a predator had recognized the opportunity. "Mr. Harrison," Thomas appeared at his side, voice low. "The emergency generators are at 60% capacity. If the storm continues at this intensity, we'll need to implement energy conservation protocols within 12 hours. What does that mean for the medical equipment?" Dr. Sterling has prioritized Alexander's monitoring systems and life support capabilities. Those will remain operational, but heating throughout the mansion will be reduced and non-essential areas will lose power entirely. William nodded, eyes never leaving his son's still form. "Implement whatever measures necessary to maintain the medical wing. And Thomas," he turned to face his security chief directly, "I need you to discreetly gather the senior household staff in my study in 1 hour. No medical personnel, no exceptions." Thomas's expression revealed nothing, but his slight hesitation spoke volumes. "Sir, Dr. Sterling has issued orders that all staff meetings require her presence during this emergency period." "Thomas, how long have you worked for the Harrison family?" 17 years, sir, since your father's time. "And in those 17 years, have you ever known a medical consultant to outrank the head of this household?" Understanding dawned in the security chief's eyes. He straightened, shoulders squaring. 1 hour, senior staff only." After Thomas departed, William remained at the observation window, watching the steady rise and fall of Alexander's chest. Something had awakened in his son today, a spark of consciousness, of connection, before being ruthlessly extinguished by whatever Vanessa had administered. The memory of Alexander's eyes meeting his, truly seeing him, burned in William's mind. That moment of connection couldn't be fabricated or imagined. His son was in there, trapped behind chemical barriers. "I'm coming for you, buddy," William whispered against the glass. "Hold on a little longer." Exactly 1 hour later, William stood before the assembled senior staff in his study. 8 people in total, Thomas and his second-in-command from security, Mrs. Winters, the house manager, Chef Paolo, the chief engineer responsible for the mansion systems, Catherine's former personal assistant, now the household administrator, and 2 long-serving members of the domestic staff who had been with the Harrison family since William was a child. These weren't just employees. They were the mansion's institutional memory, people who had witnessed the family's triumphs and tragedies, who had observed the changes in Alexander and the arrival of Vanessa Sterling with their own eyes. "I've called you here because the Harrison family faces a threat," William began without preamble. "Not from the storm, but from within our walls." He proceeded to outline the evidence against Vanessa, the falsified medical records, the unnecessary sedatives, the stolen identity, the financial connections to Helix Pharmaceuticals. He explained the breakthrough with Alexander and the suspicious timing of the seizure that followed. Throughout his presentation, the staff remained silent, their expressions shifting from shock to anger as the full picture emerged. "Why are you telling us this, sir?" Mrs. Winters finally asked. "Shouldn't you contact the authorities?" The storm has cut all external communications. We're isolated for at least another 48 hours, according to the latest forecast, William replied. In that time, Vanessa, or whatever her real name is, has threatened to secure legal guardianship of Alexander. Once that happens, removing her becomes exponentially more difficult. You need witnesses, Catherine's former assistant said softly. People who can testify to what they have observed over the years. Yes, but more immediately, I need allies, eyes and ears throughout this house. Vanessa doesn't act alone. There are members of the medical staff loyal to her. I need to know who they are. I need to know her movements, her communications, her plans. Thomas leaned forward. You're suggesting we spy on Dr. Sterling. I'm asking you to protect Alexander, William corrected, to observe and report anything suspicious. Nothing illegal, nothing that puts you at risk, just awareness and discretion. A heavy silence fell across the room as each person weighed their loyalty against potential consequences. It was Chef Paolo who finally broke it. I have watched that woman for 5 years, he said, Italian accent thickening with emotion. She takes meals alone in her office, never eats what I prepare for Alexander, brings her own food for him in special containers. When I questioned this once, she said it was medically necessary dietary restrictions. But a chef knows when something is wrong with food. One by one, others added their observations. The engineer noted how Vanessa had installed private servers in her office, separate from the mansion's main system. Mrs. Winters recalled medications arriving without the usual pharmacy documentation. Thomas's deputy mentioned unusual comings and goings of medical consultants who bypassed standard security protocols at Vanessa's insistence. Isolated incidents that had seemed merely unusual now formed a pattern of deliberate deception. What do you need from us, sir? Thomas finally asked, speaking for the group. William outlined his plan: surveillance, evidence gathering, and most importantly, creating an opportunity for Rebecca and Lily to work with Alexander again, away from Vanessa's interference. He needed proof of Alexander's responsiveness to their therapy, documented evidence that could counter Vanessa's narrative of a permanently incapacitated child. As the meeting concluded, Catherine's former assistant lingered behind. Mr. Harrison, there's something else you should know. Her voice was hesitant. Before Mrs. Harrison passed, she was investigating irregularities in a drug trial, something about unauthorized testing on pregnant women. She never shared details, but she was troubled, very troubled. William felt the floor shift beneath him. You think this was connected to Vanessa? I don't know, but Mrs. Harrison received threatening calls afterward. She was going to tell you once she had concrete evidence. The woman looked down. She died before she could. The implication hung in the air between them, too terrible to voice aloud. Had Catherine's death truly been from complications or something far more sinister? Thank you, William managed, his throat tight. That helps complete the picture. After she left, William sank into his chair, the weight of years of manipulation crushing down upon him. If Vanessa had been involved in Catherine's death, if she had then wormed her way into the household to control Alexander, the level of calculated malevolence was almost incomprehensible. A soft knock interrupted his dark thoughts. Rebecca stood in the doorway, Lily half asleep against her shoulder, despite the early evening hour. She insisted on seeing you, Rebecca explained softly. She says she knows how to help Alexander. William gestured them inside, closing the door securely behind them. Lily rubbed her eyes, suddenly looking very small and vulnerable in the expansive study. Alexander is scared, she said without preamble. Not because he's sick, because he saw. Saw what, sweetheart? William knelt to her level. The bad lady. When he opened his eyes, he saw her face. Really saw it. Lily's voice held absolute conviction. That's why she made him go back to sleep. The simplicity of the child's assessment struck William with its fundamental truth. Alexander had awakened, truly awakened, and Vanessa couldn't allow that, not when she was so close to securing control. Lily, do you think you can help Alexander again? William asked carefully. The little girl nodded solemnly. But not with the bad lady watching. She puts the wrong medicine in him. Medicine to make him forget how to see. She's right, Rebecca added. I've been reviewing the photos I took of Alexander's medical records. The medication cocktail Vanessa administers isn't standard protocol for any recognized neurological condition. It's almost as if it's designed to maintain his symptoms rather than treat them. William processed this information, strategy forming. We need to get Alexander away from the medical wing, away from Vanessa's surveillance. But with his current monitoring equipment, any disconnection will trigger immediate alerts. The storm might help us there, Rebecca suggested. If the power becomes unstable enough, equipment malfunctions wouldn't seem suspicious. The generators, William began, then stopped as realization dawned. Thomas mentioned implementing energy conservation protocols, non-essential areas losing power entirely. Could the medical wing be temporarily classified as non-essential? At least parts of it? William's mind raced through the possibilities, not without raising Vanessa's suspicions. But there's another approach. The conservatory has its own power system, originally installed to maintain temperature control for Catherine's plants, regardless of external conditions. If we could move Alexander there during a planned outage, the strategy took shape between them. A controlled power failure in the medical wing, an emergency relocation of Alexander to the conservatory due to generator prioritization, and a window of opportunity for Lily to work with him again, all while gathering documented evidence of his responsiveness. There's significant risk, William acknowledged. If Alexander truly had a seizure, moving him could be dangerous. I don't think he had a real seizure, Rebecca said quietly. I've seen seizures before. His didn't look right, too sudden, too dramatic. And with that drug I found in Vanessa's office, he didn't, Lily confirmed with a child's absolute certainty. The bad lady made it happen, to make us stop helping him. William looked between them, weighing the terrible responsibility of this decision. His entire life had been built on calculated risks, corporate acquisitions, market expansions, research investments. But never had the stakes been so personal. Never had his son's life hung in the balance. Tomorrow night, he decided finally, the storm is forecast to peak around 7 p.m. That's when we'll make our move. The following day unfolded with excruciating slowness, each hour a carefully choreographed performance. William visited Alexander's bedside with appropriate concern, reviewed Vanessa's treatment proposals with seeming consideration, and maintained the facade of a father deferring to medical expertise. Meanwhile, throughout the mansion, the senior staff executed their parts of the plan with subtle precision. The chief engineer conducted a thorough assessment of the backup generators, casually noting strain on the system and the need for strategic power allocation. Mrs. Winters inventoried emergency supplies, ensuring the conservatory was stocked with necessities under the guise of establishing backup stations throughout the mansion. Thomas's security team modified camera coverage, creating blind spots that would prove crucial during the evening operation. Vanessa, meanwhile, grew increasingly agitated as the storm showed no signs of abating. William observed her checking the satellite phone repeatedly, frustration evident when each attempt to contact the outside world failed. Whatever timeline she'd established was clearly being disrupted by their continued isolation. The neurological team in Zurich is concerned about the delay in implementing the new protocol, she informed William during their afternoon meeting. Alexander's seizure indicates progression of his condition. Intervention becomes more critical with each passing hour. Yet he appears stable now, William observed, nodding toward the monitoring displays. Surface stability can mask underlying deterioration, Vanessa countered smoothly. Have you had a chance to review the guardianship authorization? Still reviewing. Legal language requires careful consideration. William maintained eye contact, his corporate negotiation skills serving him well. I'd like to see Alexander demonstrate these concerning symptoms myself before signing anything so definitive. Something dangerous flickered behind Vanessa's professional smile. Of course, though I should warn you, abrupt changes in his environment or routine could trigger another episode. For his safety, our interactions must remain controlled. The threat was barely veiled. Attempt to connect with Alexander again, and Vanessa would ensure another seizure provided justification for more aggressive intervention. I understand completely, William assured her, the lie bitter on his tongue. At precisely 6:45 that evening, William stood in his study with Thomas, Rebecca, and the chief engineer. Lily had been settled in the conservatory with her clay materials, prepared for Alexander's arrival, but shielded from the more disturbing aspects of the operation. The storm has reached peak intensity, the engineer reported. Wind speeds exceeding 70 miles per hour, temperature dropping below zero with wind chill. The main power grid failed 20 minutes ago, and we're operating exclusively on generator power. What about Vanessa? William asked Thomas. In her office, video conference with the medical staff. She believes it's a scheduled treatment review. My team has ensured the conference will experience technical difficulties at 7:05, requiring her attention for approximately 15 minutes. The medical wing? Nurse Jensen is on duty. She's been with the family since Alexander was born and confirmed her loyalty this morning. Two orderlies who've been with us less than a year are on break. Dr. Michaels is conducting inventory in the pharmacy, personally supervised by Mrs. Winters. William nodded, checking his watch. And the power redistribution? The engineer consulted his tablet. Programmed and ready. At 7 o'clock sharp, the medical wing will experience a cascading system failure requiring emergency protocols. Backup power will be insufficient for all monitoring equipment, necessitating Alexander's relocation to the only other suitable environment, the conservatory with its independent power system. Once there, William pressed, security cameras in the conservatory will experience a weather-related malfunction lasting approximately 40 minutes. Emergency lighting only, no recording capability. The official record will show only that Alexander was temporarily relocated during a power management crisis, then returned to the medical wing when systems were stabilized. The plan was comprehensive, each contingency addressed, each staff member positioned exactly where they needed to be. Yet uncertainty gnawed at William's confidence. So much could go wrong. If Alexander truly was medically fragile, moving him could pose genuine risk. If Vanessa discovered their plan, the consequences would be devastating. We're manipulating medical protocols during a genuine emergency, Rebecca voiced his unspoken concern. Are we certain this is justified? We're creating a window of opportunity to assess Alexander without chemical interference, William corrected. Everything we've discovered suggests Vanessa has been deliberately maintaining his condition, not treating it. This may be our only chance to confirm that before I'm forced to sign away my parental rights. At exactly 7:00 p.m., the mansion lights flickered dramatically. Emergency systems engaged with a low, persistent hum. In the medical wing, monitors began shutting down in a carefully orchestrated sequence, triggering alarms that summoned staff from throughout the facility. Nurse Jensen moved with practiced efficiency, disconnecting Alexander from the non-essential monitoring equipment while maintaining critical life support. Power redistribution protocol, she announced calmly to the scrambling staff. Primary generator insufficient for full operations, implementing emergency relocation to Conservation Unit 3. The designation, Conservation Unit 3, was established code for the conservatory, though rarely invoked in actual practice. Its use now raised no immediate suspicions among junior staff, who helped transfer Alexander to a transport gurney with attached portable monitoring. As predicted, Vanessa's video conference experienced technical difficulties at precisely 7:05, keeping her occupied with rebooting systems rather than overseeing the emergency response. By the time she emerged from her office, Alexander was already en route to the conservatory, escorted by Nurse Jensen and Thomas's most trusted security officer. William intercepted Vanessa in the corridor, further delaying her response with apparent confusion and concern. What's happening? The alarms? Alexander? Power management emergency, she snapped, attempting to push past him. Where is Alexander? Emergency relocation protocol, the chief engineer interjected smoothly, appearing as if summoned. Medical wing power reduced to critical systems only. Patient transferred to Conservation Unit 3 until full power restored. Conservation, the conservatory? Vanessa's composure slipped momentarily. That's completely inappropriate. Return him to the medical wing immediately. Impossible with current power allocation, the engineer countered, presenting his tablet with complex technical readings. Main generator redlining at 87% capacity. Medical wing operating at minimal life support only. The conservatory's independent system is the only environment with sufficient power for full monitoring. Vanessa's clinical mask cracked further, frustration bleeding through. This is unacceptable. Who authorized this protocol? Standard emergency procedure, Dr. Sterling, Thomas replied, his tone professionally neutral. established by the previous medical director and never countermanded. Would you like to review the documentation? I can have it brought to your office while the engineering team works to resolve the power distribution issue. The strategic delay worked perfectly. By offering Vanessa documentation, which would take time to locate and deliver, they provided her a procedurally appropriate option that nevertheless kept her occupied. Her medical training and position demanded she follow proper protocols, even as her instincts clearly screamed that something was wrong. Fine. Bring the documentation immediately. Her gaze turned to William. As Alexander's primary physician, I must insist on supervising his care during this transition. Of course, William agreed smoothly, though perhaps reviewing the emergency protocols first would ensure we're following proper procedure. Alexander appears stable with Nurse Jensen, and your expertise is invaluable in assessing our response strategy. The subtle flattery, combined with the procedural trap, left Vanessa momentarily stymied. To insist on seeing Alexander immediately would suggest emotional rather than professional motivation. To acknowledge the emergency protocols was to temporarily cede control. 20 minutes, she finally snapped. I want those protocols in my hands and Alexander back in the medical wing within 20 minutes, or I'll document this as a dangerous violation of care standards. As Vanessa stalked away, William exchanged glances with Thomas. The window was open, but narrower than they'd hoped. 20 minutes to uncover the truth about Alexander's condition, to document evidence of Vanessa's manipulation, to find proof that could stand against her inevitable counterattack. William reached the conservatory as Nurse Jensen was completing Alexander's transfer from the gurney to a specially prepared reclining chair. The space had been transformed from its daytime appearance, grow lights providing gentle illumination, temperature carefully regulated, and Lily's clay station positioned within easy reach of where Alexander would rest. Rebecca stood nearby, medical tablet in hand, ready to document everything. Lily sat cross-legged on the floor beside her materials, unnaturally still and serious for a 7-year-old. How is he? William asked Nurse Jensen. Sedated but stable, she replied quietly. His vital signs are stronger than they've been in months. Whatever Dr. Sterling has been giving him, it wasn't just to manage seizures. How long until the sedatives wear off? Jensen consulted the portable monitor. Given the dosage curve, he should begin regaining consciousness within 10 minutes. But William, her use of his first name, rare after years of professional distance, conveyed the gravity of her concern. If Dr. Sterling has been maintaining his condition medically, sudden withdrawal could be dangerous. We don't know what his baseline actually is. I understand the risk, William acknowledged, but continuing as we have means condemning him to a lifetime of chemical imprisonment. 10 minutes, carefully monitored, with you supervising. That's all I'm asking. Jensen nodded reluctantly. I've reduced the sedative drip to minimum. If he shows any signs of distress, I'm intervening immediately. Agreed. William turned to Lily, who had risen and now stood beside Alexander's chair, studying his face with solemn intensity. Lily, we don't have much time. Can you help him like before? He's still very far away, the little girl said softly. The bad medicine sends him to a dark place where he can't find his way back. But I know how to make a path for him. She began arranging her materials with methodical precision. Different types of clay, water, natural elements she collected from the conservatory. Her movements were unhurried despite the time pressure. Each placement deliberate and purposeful. He needs to remember how to feel before he can remember how to see, she explained, preparing a small bowl of clay mixed with warm water. The medicine makes everything numb. We have to wake up his hands first. William watched, heart pounding, as Lily gently took Alexander's limp hand and placed it in the warm clay mixture. She held it there, saying nothing, simply waiting with the infinite patience of a child who understands something adults cannot grasp. Minutes passed. Alexander's breathing remained steady, but no other response was visible. The portable monitor continued its rhythmic beeping, marking vital signs that remained stable but unchanged. William, Rebecca said softly, checking her watch. We have less than 15 minutes before Vanessa returns. Give her time, William responded, though anxiety clawed at his chest. What if they were wrong? What if Alexander's condition wasn't manufactured but genuine, and this was nothing but desperate wish fulfillment? Then, so subtle it might have been imagined, Alexander's fingers moved within the clay mixture. Not the random twitching of unconscious reflex, but a deliberate exploration, feeling the texture between his fingers. He's finding the path, Lily whispered. Now we need to help him see it. She prepared another mixture, this one cooler, with a different consistency, and with infinite gentleness applied it to Alexander's closed eyelids. The method was similar to their previous session, but with careful modifications, as if Lily were adapting to information only she could perceive. Alexander, she called softly, follow my voice. The dark place isn't real. It's just medicine trying to trick you. William moved closer, kneeling beside his son's chair. We're here, buddy. Dad's here. You can come back now. Alexander's breathing changed, a deeper inhale, a slight catch, then a more natural rhythm. His fingers continued moving in the clay, with greater purpose now. His brain waves are changing, Nurse Jensen reported, watching the monitor with professional focus. Shifting from delta toward theta, he's transitioning from deep sedation toward consciousness. Alexander, William called again, can you hear me? The boy's eyelids fluttered beneath their thin coating of clay. His lips parted slightly, a soft exhalation that might have been the beginning of sound. The medicine is still holding him down, Lily said with a child's matter-of-fact certainty. We need to help him fight it. She took more warm clay, forming it into a small bird like the one Alexander had responded to days earlier. Placing it in his free hand, she closed his fingers around it. Remember this? You made it fly. You can make it fly again. Alexander's hand tightened around the clay bird. His breathing quickened, his head turning slightly toward Lily's voice. Then with visible effort, his eyes opened, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening. The clay on his eyelids cracked and flaked away as he blinked repeatedly. Alexander? William's voice broke on his son's name. The boy's gaze moved slowly, finding his father's face. Recognition dawned, not the vacant stare of previous years, but genuine connection. His lips moved, forming a shape that might have been Dad. Yes, buddy, it's Dad. Tears streamed unchecked down William's face. I'm right here. Alexander struggled to sit up, fighting against the weakness of muscles long underused. William supported him, scarcely daring to breathe as his son, truly his son, present and aware, leaned against his chest. Bad, lady, Alexander managed, the words slurred but unmistakable. Hurts me. The simple phrase confirmed their worst suspicions while simultaneously demonstrating what Vanessa had worked so hard to prevent. Alexander could speak. He was aware. He understood. I know, buddy, William whispered, holding him close. She won't hurt you anymore. I promise. Rebecca had been recording everything, capturing Alexander's awakening and first coherent words from multiple angles. Nurse Jensen documented the medical readings, creating an evidence trail that would be difficult to dismiss. His neurological readings are remarkable, Jensen reported, voice tinged with awe and professional outrage. This is not consistent with any congenital condition. His patterns suggest heavy, long-term sedation suddenly reduced. How long has she been drugging him? William asked, the question painful to voice. Jensen studied the readings. Based on these metabolic markers, years. Since he was a toddler, at least. The confirmation struck William like a physical blow. Years of his son's childhood. Stolen. Years when Alexander might have been learning, growing, developing normally, erased by Vanessa's calculated manipulation. William, Rebecca's urgent voice broke through his horrified realization. We have less than 5 minutes. The reminder of Vanessa's imminent return snapped William back to the present crisis. They had their evidence, irrefutable proof of Alexander's true condition, and by extension, Vanessa's medical malpractice. But they remained isolated by the storm, communications severed, with a dangerous woman about to discover her years-long deception exposed. Jensen, I need options, William said, shifting to crisis management mode while keeping Alexander secure against his chest. We can't return him to the medical wing, not to Vanessa's care. The nurse considered for a moment. We can maintain him here. The conservatory's power system is independent. We have portable monitoring equipment. I can administer fluids and basic care until emergency services can reach us. She'll fight this, Rebecca warned. She'll claim temporary emergency protocols don't override her medical authority. Let her, William's voice hardened. I have evidence now. I have witnesses. Most importantly, I have my son, awake, aware, and capable of identifying his abuser. Alexander had been listening to this exchange with surprising attentiveness for a child emerging from sedation. Now he struggled to form more words, fighting against years of enforced silence. She, not doctor, he managed, the effort visible in his face. What do you mean, Alexander? William asked gently. Heard them. She, pretend. Alexander's frustration at his limited speech was evident. Mason, plan. The name sent electric shock through William. Mason, the Helix Pharmaceuticals executive Vanessa had been communicating with. Alexander had heard their conversations, had understood what was happening even while trapped in his chemically induced prison. Mason Blackwell? William clarified. From Helix? Alexander nodded, the movement becoming stronger and more coordinated with each passing minute, as if his body were remembering how to function without the sedative haze. Plan, take, company, Alexander continued, determination overriding the struggle. Hurt, Mom. The final words hung in the air, devastating in their implication. Not just corporate espionage or medical malpractice, but something far more sinister. Catherine's death, previously attributed to childbirth complications, suddenly cast in a new, horrifying light. Before William could process this revelation, Thomas's voice came through the security earpiece he wore. Vanessa is heading toward the conservatory, ETA 2 minutes. Decision time. They could attempt to hide Alexander, to maintain the deception a little longer. But that meant returning him to a sedated state, surrendering the ground they'd gained. Or they could stand their ground, confronting Vanessa with the evidence they'd gathered, forcing a showdown within the isolated mansion. William looked at his son's face, truly seeing him, perhaps for the first time in 8 years, and made his choice. We stay, he announced. We end this now. Rebecca nodded, positioning herself to continue recording. Nurse Jensen checked Alexander's vital signs one final time, ensuring he was stable enough for the confrontation ahead. Lily, understanding the tension with a child's intuition, moved to stand protectively beside Alexander's chair. The conservatory doors burst open. Vanessa entered like a storm front, 2 orderlies trailing behind her. She stopped abruptly at the tableau before her, William standing protective beside Alexander, who sat upright and alert, Rebecca with her recording device, Nurse Jensen monitoring vital signs, and little Lily, small but defiant, still holding her clay materials. For one revealing moment, naked fury transformed Vanessa's features before her clinical mask slammed back into place. What is happening here? Her voice was deadly calm. This is a serious violation of emergency protocols. No violation, Dr. Sterling, William replied, emphasis on her false title. Just a father finally seeing his son's true condition. Vanessa's gaze locked onto Alexander, registering his alertness with visible alarm. He should be sedated. This level of stimulation after a seizure event could trigger catastrophic neurological damage. Interesting theory, William countered, especially since we've confirmed no actual seizure occurred, just a reaction to whatever drug you administered when you realized he was breaking free of your chemical prison. The accusation hung in the air between them. Vanessa's expression didn't change, but her posture shifted subtly, recalibrating. You're emotionally overwrought, William. Understandable given the stress of the storm and Alexander's condition. But making unfounded accusations against his physician won't help anyone. She turned to the orderlies. Prepare the patient for immediate return to the medical wing. Full sedation protocol. Neither orderly moved. That won't be happening, William said quietly. Alexander remains in my custody. Not yours, Dr. Sterling. Or should I say, Jennifer Mason. The name hit its mark. Vanessa, Jennifer, flinched almost imperceptibly. I don't know what you're talking about, she recovered quickly. This is dangerous nonsense. Alexander requires immediate medical intervention. Alexander requires protection from you. William's voice remained steady. We know everything, your identity theft, your deliberate sedation of my son to maintain his incapacitated status, your arrangement with Mason Blackwell to secure control of Metanova through Alexander's inheritance. Perhaps even your involvement in Catherine's death. Jennifer's composure cracked further at the mention of Catherine. Her hand moved toward her lab coat pocket, a gesture William immediately recognized as threatening. "Thomas," he said quietly. The security chief stepped forward from where he'd been observing near the door. "Ma'am, I need you to keep your hands visible." "This is absurd." Jennifer's voice rose slightly. "I'm trying to save a patient from his father's dangerous interference. If anything happens to Alexander because of this amateur intervention, it's on all of your heads." Alexander suddenly spoke, his voice stronger than before, fueled by what might have been years of suppressed rage. "You hurt Phoebo." The room froze at those three simple words. Jennifer stared at Alexander as if seeing a ghost, the living manifestation of her greatest failure and most dangerous witness. "That's impossible," she whispered. "The formulation wasn't as effective as you thought," William finished for her. "Or perhaps my son is stronger than you calculated." Jennifer's clinical facade crumbled entirely, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "You have no idea what you're interfering with. This goes beyond you, beyond Medinova. Helix has invested years in this acquisition strategy." "By chemically imprisoning a child?" Rebecca interjected, disgust evident in her voice. "By potentially murdering his mother?" "Catherine was collateral damage," Jennifer snapped, abandoning all pretense. "She discovered the unauthorized trials. She was going to expose everything. We needed access to Alexander, to his inheritance shares. It was never personal." The confession hung in the air, damning in its casual cruelty. William felt ice spreading through his veins at the confirmation of his worst fears. Catherine's death had been deliberate. "Thomas," he said quietly, "place Dr. Sterling under house arrest pending the arrival of authorities." Jennifer laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "On what authority? With what evidence?" "It's your word against mine, William. A grieving widower who couldn't accept his son's condition versus a respected neurological specialist. Who do you think the authorities will believe?" "Perhaps they'll believe this." William nodded to Rebecca, who turned her tablet to display the recorded evidence. Alexander's awakening, his speech, the medical readings confirming long-term sedation. "Or perhaps," William continued, "they'll believe Alexander himself, now capable of testifying to years of abuse. Or Nurse Jensen's documentation of the drugs you've administered. Or the financial records linking you to Helix Pharmaceuticals under your real identity." With each piece of evidence William listed, Jennifer's expression darkened. Her hand moved again toward her pocket, more deliberately this time. "Thomas," William said sharply. The security chief moved forward, but Jennifer was faster. From her pocket, she pulled not a weapon but a syringe, uncapped and ready. "Stay back," she warned, desperation replacing clinical calculation. "This contains enough pentobarbital to stop his heart. Alexander remains my patient and my responsibility. I will not allow years of work to be destroyed by a weekend of amateur therapy." The threat froze everyone in place. Nurse Jensen's face paled at the mention of the powerful barbiturate, a drug that could indeed prove fatal in sufficient dosage. "Jennifer," William kept his voice level despite the terror gripping his heart. "Think about what you're doing. This is no longer about corporate takeovers or medical guardianship. This is attempted murder. There's no coming back from that." "There's no coming back regardless," she replied, a strange calm settling over her features. "Once the storm clears, once communications are restored, my career is over. My freedom is forfeit. This was never about money alone, William. It was about recognition, about demonstrating that my research into neurological suppression had practical applications beyond what short-sighted ethics committees would approve." "You experimented on my son," William said, horror dawning. "He wasn't just collateral in a corporate takeover. He was your research subject." Jennifer's smile was chilling in its pride. The most perfect subject imaginable. Isolated, continuously monitored, with a father too grief-stricken and guilt-ridden to question the expert he had hired. 8 years of uninterrupted data on long-term cognitive suppression and selective reactivation. The papers I could have published would have revolutionized neurological control. Alexander, who had been listening intently to this exchange, suddenly moved with surprising coordination for a child emerging from years of sedation. He knocked the clay bowl from the table beside him, sending it crashing to the floor at Jennifer's feet. The distraction was momentary but sufficient. Thomas lunged forward, tackling Jennifer before she could regain her balance on the slippery clay. The syringe flew from her hand, skittering across the conservatory floor. What followed happened in chaotic fragments. Jennifer struggling against Thomas's restraining hold, orderlies moving to assist, Rebecca pulling Lily away from the confrontation, Nurse Jensen checking Alexander for signs of distress. When the chaos subsided, Jennifer sat restrained in a conservatory chair, security personnel standing guard on either side. The syringe had been secured, its contents preserved as evidence. Alexander remained alert and stable, watching the scene with complete awareness and understanding. "You've accomplished nothing," Jennifer said bitterly. "Without my protocols, without my medication, you have no idea what will happen to him. Abrupt withdrawal could cause permanent damage. Seizures, regression." "We'll take that risk," William replied, his arm around Alexander's shoulders. "Actual medical professionals can manage the transition safely." "And when the storm clears," Jennifer pressed, "when communications are restored, you think this ends neatly, William. The scandal alone will destroy Metanova. The board will never recover from the revelation that their CEO allowed his son to become an unwitting test subject for years." "Let me worry about Metanova," William said. "You should worry about the multiple felony charges awaiting you. Identity theft, medical malpractice, child endangerment, corporate espionage, and possibly," his voice hardened, "murder." Jennifer fell silent, the full weight of her situation apparently sinking in. The mask of Dr. Vanessa Sterling, respected neurologist, had disintegrated entirely, revealing the ruthless researcher who had sacrificed a child's development and possibly a woman's life on the altar of scientific ambition and corporate greed. As security personnel escorted Jennifer from the conservatory to a secure room where she would remain under guard until authorities could arrive, William turned his full attention to Alexander. His son sat quietly, exhaustion evident in his posture, but awareness bright in his eyes. "How do you feel, buddy?" William asked softly. Alexander considered the question with surprising thoughtfulness. "Heavy, but clear. Head not foggy now." Each word came more easily than the last, as if neural pathways long suppressed were reactivating with use. Nurse Jensen had explained this might happen, that Alexander's fundamental capabilities had been chemically inhibited rather than developmentally absent. With the suppressing medications reduced, his natural functions were beginning to reassert themselves. "You're safe now," William promised. "She can't hurt you anymore." Alexander nodded solemnly and then turned toward Lily, who had returned to her clay table and was quietly creating new figures. "Thank you," he said carefully, the words emerging with deliberate precision, "for finding me in the dark." Lily looked up, her smile radiant. "I told you the clay remembers. It helped you remember, too." The simplicity of her explanation seemed to satisfy Alexander. He reached for another piece of clay, working it between his fingers with growing dexterity. Rebecca approached William quietly. "The storm is beginning to weaken according to the latest reports. Communications should be restored within 12 to 24 hours. And then the real work begins," William acknowledged. "Medical evaluations, legal proceedings, corporate damage control." "Are you worried about what happens next?" William watched Alexander and Lily working together with the clay, his son's movements becoming more confident with each passing minute. "The only thing I was truly worried about was getting my son back. Everything else is just details." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of activity. Alexander's condition continued to improve as the sedatives cleared his system. His speech, while still halting, grew more fluid with each hour. His motor control strengthened. Most remarkably, his vision, which had been functionally present but neurologically suppressed, began to process information properly. Nurse Jensen coordinated with the remaining medical staff to establish a safe withdrawal protocol, carefully monitoring Alexander for signs of adverse reaction as years of chemical suppression were gradually lifted. There were difficult moments, periods of sensory overload, brief episodes of tremors, but nothing approaching the manufactured seizure Jennifer had induced. Jennifer herself remained under guard in a secure room, all medical credentials revoked, all access to mansion systems terminated. Without her carefully controlled medication schedule, her hold over Alexander dissolved hour by hour. As dawn broke on the fourth day of the blizzard, the storm finally began to abate. Wind speeds dropped. Snowfall diminished from blinding sheets to gentle flurries. On the horizon, patches of clear sky appeared for the first time in days. William stood in the conservatory, watching Alexander sleep peacefully on a makeshift bed they'd established there. Unlike the artificial sedation of previous years, this was natural sleep, his son's body recovering from the ordeal it had endured. Nearby, Rebecca dozed in an armchair, Lily curled against her side like a small cat. These strangers who had arrived by chance or perhaps by fate had become instrumental in saving Alexander. More than that, they had become something William had thought forever lost after Catherine's death: family. Thomas appeared at his side, voice low to avoid disturbing the sleepers. "Sir, satellite communications have been restored. I've contacted the authorities. State police are en route along with federal agents. The corporate security team has been briefed and is implementing the contingency protocols you established." William nodded. "And the board?" "Emergency session scheduled for noon tomorrow. Your evidence package has been securely transmitted to the legal team. Initial response is supportive. Damage control will take time," William acknowledged, "but Metanova will survive." Thomas hesitated, then added, "Sir, I feel I should apologize. We failed to properly vet Dr. Sterling, Jennifer Mason, before she gained access to Alexander. The security protocols were circumvented by a sophisticated operation years in the planning." William completed the thought. "This wasn't a single infiltrator, Thomas. This was a coordinated corporate espionage effort with medical professionals involved. Don't shoulder that responsibility alone." The security chief nodded, though the guilt remained evident in his posture. "The authorities estimate arrival within 4 hours, weather permitting." After Thomas departed, William moved to sit beside Alexander's bed. In sleep, his son looked peaceful, the perpetual tension of his chemically maintained condition finally absent. William gently brushed dark curls from Alexander's forehead, marveling at the simple contact that had been emotionally impossible for so long. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for not seeing what was happening, for hiding behind specialists instead of being your father. That changes now, I promise." Alexander's eyes opened slowly, focusing immediately on William's face with newfound clarity. "Dad? I'm here, buddy." Alexander struggled to sit up, still adjusting to coordinating his movements without chemical interference. "The bad lady, gone?" "Yes, she can't hurt you anymore." Alexander nodded, processing this information. Then, with careful deliberation, "Mom knew, tried to stop her." The simple statement struck William like a physical blow. "You remember that?" "Bits, pieces." Alexander's face scrunched with the effort of recollection. "Heard them fighting. Mom said, 'Stop the tests.' Bad lady was angry." William took his son's hand, steadying them both. "Alexander, this is very important. Do you remember what happened to Mom?" Alexander's eyes filled with tears. "Shot. In her medicine. Saw the bad lady. Changed the bag. Mom got sick after." The confirmation of what William had begun to suspect was nonetheless devastating to hear. Not a natural complication of childbirth, but deliberate murder, disguised as a medical emergency. Catherine had discovered the unauthorized drug trials, had threatened to expose Jennifer's operation, and had paid with her life. "We'll tell the police everything," William promised. "Mom will get justice." Alexander nodded solemnly, then his attention shifted to Lily, still sleeping against her mother. "They stay? After storm?" The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. In the space of a few days, Lily had accomplished what years of expensive therapies could not. She had reached Alexander, had helped him find his way back from the chemical prison Jennifer had created. "Would you like that?" William asked. Alexander nodded, the movement becoming more natural with the practice. "Lily sees me, real me." The profound truth in that simple statement brought tears to William's eyes. Lily had somehow seen past the imposed limitations, recognizing the trapped awareness within. Her instinctive approach, using tactile stimulation to bypass the chemically blocked visual and auditory pathways, had created a bridge when sophisticated medical technology had failed. "Then we'll find a way." William promised. Together. As the storm finally released its grip on the New Hampshire countryside, the first rays of sunlight penetrated the conservatory's glass ceiling, illuminating the small group within. The road ahead would be challenging. Alexander faced a long recovery, the legal proceedings against Jennifer would be complex, and the corporate implications for Medinova remained uncertain. Yet in that moment of early morning light, William Harrison felt something he'd thought forever lost in the aftermath of Catherine's death. Hope. Not the desperate hope that had driven him to build a medical fortress around his son, but genuine optimism for a future where Alexander could develop and thrive as the person he was always meant to be. Outside, the world remained blanketed in the aftermath of the blizzard, pristine white stretching to the horizon. But within the glass walls of the conservatory, spring had already begun.